Just making sure we're okay.
Scared the crap out of me.
All right, so well, tonight I am the angel of death, and I will explain that. Don't worry, I'm not here for you. I didn't come for you. I came for a guy named Haman. Is anybody here named Haman? Okay, well, I'll find that guy. All right, so a couple days ago, there was a holiday. I bet you guys missed it, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, you said, I didn't know there was any holiday. You know, nobody told me about a holiday or a party. But a few days ago, there was a holiday called Purim. Has anybody ever heard of that? Purim? Did you know that Purim is in your Bibles? All you got to do is go to the book of Esther. So every year around February or March, in synagogues all across the world, they're celebrating the Feast of Lots. That's the word Purim. That's where it comes from. It means Feast of Lots. So I'm going to read to you just a small portion of the book of Esther. And in Esther chapter 9, verse 28, it says, "And that these days should be remembered and kept through every generation." So ever since Purim, we're keeping this holiday as Jewish people through every generation. So you guys are all adopted Jewish people tonight, because we're going to celebrate Purim. We're going to have fun. We're going to have a good time tonight. And these are the days that should be remembered and kept throughout the generations. Every family, every province, every city. That means New Brunswick, every province, right? So it means New Brunswick. Every city, it means Plaster Rock. Even though we're technically not a city, we're so small, we're a village. We can't legally be called a town, we're a village. And that these days of Purim, which means the Feast of Lots, should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. So, the book of Esther has instituted a holiday called Purim. And it means the Feast of Lots. So, you know what lots are, right? It's like, lots is like rolling the dice. It's kind of like drawing a name out of a hat, or it's kind of like, drawing straws. That's what lots are, casting lots. And the reason it's called the Feast of Lots is because Haman, the evil Haman, had casted lots to pick a date which would be the best day to extinguish and annihilate all of the Persian Jews. I mean, we're talking a Holocaust. We're talking an extinction level event. He hated the Jews so much. He was so anti-Semitic, he just wanted to wipe out all of the Jews. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about the Feast of Purim. Now, just about every Jewish holiday can be summed up like this. They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. That's basically the summary of every Jewish holiday out there. And as believers in Messiah Yeshua, you have been grafted in to that Jewish family, right? So you're spiritual Jews. You're Jews at heart. You may not be Jews physically. That's okay. You're my brother and sister in Messiah Yeshua, Jesus Christ. So you are as much as a part of this celebration as me and my family are. So, I'm going to explain to you why I'm dressed up as the angel of death. So, it's like I said, in synagogues all over the world, they have the Feast of Purim, the Feast of Lots, and it's like a costume party. And we disguise ourselves. We dress up. And we try to disguise ourselves so nobody knows who we are. So you walk into a synagogue, you're going to see a clown sitting on the first pew. You know, you might see somebody dressed up like Mordecai somewhere. You might be somebody dressed up like an astronaut. I mean, there's no rules. I mean, people are just dressed up in whatever they want, right? So now it's kind of become a tradition at my house whenever we celebrate Purim that we have to have a reason why we're dressed the way we are, right? So there's got to be a story behind your costume. You've got to find some way to fit yourself into the story of the book of Esther, the story of Purim. So this is my explanation. I'm the angel of death. I'm the grim reaper. And I'm here for the bad guy Haman. So that's how I fit into the story. I almost came in a Star Trek outfit, and I was going to say I got caught in a time warp, and I was transported here. But I figured that angel of death would be more plausible. So you guys can pretend to be whoever you want. So now what happens during the Feast of Purim in synagogues is they read the entire book of Esther. Now the entire book of Esther is not in a book. It's in a scroll. Have you ever heard somebody say the whole Megillah, or the entire Megillah? Anybody ever heard that saying or that phrase when they talk about the whole thing? Or say, well, this is the whole Megillah. Well, the scroll of the book of Esther is called the Megillah. And they read the entire Megillah, right? So they read the whole book of Esther. But don't worry, we're not going to read the whole book of Esther tonight, because the whole theme of Purim is to have fun, to be laid back, to kick back, to have fun. And so I'm going to summarize the book of Esther in a little short play, and I'm going to do all the parts. You know, so we're going to have fun. And you know what? You guys aren't allowed to fall asleep. No, it's audience participation. You guys have to participate in this story. And this is how you're going to do it. When I start reading the story, there's a hero and there's a villain. Mordecai is the hero. So is Esther. But Mordecai, whenever you hear the name Mordecai, you go, hooray! Yeah! Woo! You whistle, you say hooray, you just clap and you get all excited. And so whenever Mordecai's name is mentioned, that's what you do. Now Haman, on the other hand, Haman is the bad guy. So whenever you hear the name Haman, you just you make a bunch of noise just to drown out the name, because he's the bad guy, right? So let's give it a try. So every time I say Mordecai, what are you going to do? That's right, there you go. Christian's got it. So whenever I say Haman, what are you going to do? Okay, good. All right, that's a good start. So, I summarized kind of, Purim and what it's all about. Now, like I said, we disguise ourselves. We dress up into something that we're not. Why? Because God disguised Himself in the book of Esther. If you read the book of Esther, you will not find God's name or title, not once. Not once! But God's presence and God's actions are clearly seen in the story of Purim. But His name is not mentioned. You won't see Jehovah, you won't see, any of His other names, you won't see Adonai, you won't see even the title God. It's just not there. But in the Hebrew text, have you ever heard of Bible codes? Some people think they're bunk, but some people, think that there's some validity to it. So the Hebrew is all kind of like one letter right after another. So sometimes if you count certain letters, you'll land on other letters. So every so many letters might spell a word. So God's name is peppered throughout the entire book of Esther through equidistant lettering. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about that before we kind of get into the story here. And so God is clearly seen, and He's disguised in the book of Esther. Now another person who disguised themselves was Esther herself. Esther was a Jew. She was a Persian Jew, right? And she kept her identity secret. Nobody knew that she was Jewish when she became queen of Persia. And right at the right moment, she exposed her identity, says, you know what? Everybody thought I was Persian. Everybody thought I was a Gentile, but guess what? I'm a Jew. So even Esther disguised herself. So you see people wearing masks and disguising themselves all throughout the book of Esther. So let me get into a little bit about this Bible code and this equidistant lettering. Now, God's name in Hebrew is made up of 4 Hebrew letters. It's called the Tetragrammaton in the fancy scholarly, but it's called Yud, He, Vav, He. Yud, He, Vav, He are the letters, and sometimes we don't really know how to pronounce it, and Jewish people usually don't pronounce it because it's so sacred, so we'll just say Adonai or we'll just say Lord. So I will just say Yud, He, Vav, He. I won't really say it. But that's the letters of his proper name. So in Esther 1:20 it says, and when the king decreed that he shall make published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give their husbands honor, both to the great and to the small. God's name, Yud He Vav He, is formed by the initial letters in the verse. Yud He Vav He is spelled backwards because in the verse, God turns back the counsel of man. So in Esther 5:4 it says, and Esther answered, if it seems good to you, unto you the king, let the king and Haman come this day. Boo. There you go. Somebody remembered. A little bit late, but we'll get it. Come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. So Yud He Vav He is spelled by the initial letters as he, is initiating the action. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is spelled forward in this verse because the Almighty is ruling in favor of Esther's act. So we see in the verse in Esther 1:20 that when man is trying to go against God, God's name is spelled backwards. And when Esther is doing something for God, his name is spelled forward in the Bible code. So you have Esther 5:13, it says, "Yet all that availeth me nothing. So as long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate." So those are the words of Haman. It says, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is formed by the last or final letters of this verse because Haman's, his end is fast approaching. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appears backwards in this text, seeing as God is overruling Haman's joy and turning back his counsel. So in another verse, in Esther 7:7, it says, "And the king arises from the banquet of wine, and in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up and made a request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king." So again, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is spelled in this verse by using the final letters because Haman's finality had come. Yet in the text, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is spelled forward because God was ruling and bringing about what he has determined. Now, Chuck Missler, in his book, Cosmic Codes, Hidden Messages from the Edge of Eternity on page 83, has to say about these verses. He says, the first of the two, the first two acrostics are a pair, having the names formed by the initial letters of the four words. The last two are pairs, having the name formed by the final letters of the four words. The first and the third acrostic are a pair, having the name spelled backward, and then the second and the fourth are a pair, having the name spelled forward. The first and the third, in which the name is formed backwards, are from the text spoken by the Gentiles, non-Jewish people. The second and the fourth, in which the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is formed forward, are from the text spoken by Israelites, by Jews. But this is not all. I am, because God's, he says, I am the great I am, right? I am is hidden in the final letters spelled backwards in Esther 7:5. And that says, "Then King Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he? And where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so?" The word Messiah, or Mashiach, the Hebrew word for Christ, is found hidden in the Hebrew text of Esther 1:3 by skipping 8 letters, 8 being the number representing beginnings. So Esther 1:3 says, "In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all the princes and the servants, and the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the province being before him." So Esther 4:7 says, "So Mordecai went his way and did according to all Esther had commanded." In this verse, Yeshua, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus, Yeshua's name, which means salvation, is found by counting every 8 letters. And again, 8 is the Hebrew number for new beginnings. El Shaddai is the Hebrew word for the Almighty. It is found in the text by counting every 7 letters in Esther 4:2, which reads, "And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth." And as a divine punchline, God has the phrase, get this, you're going to love this. This can only be God, right? This is actually hidden in the code of the Hebrew text of Esther. And as a divine punchline, God has the phrase, Haman and Satan stink. Seriously, Haman and Satan stink by counting every 6 letters 10 times in Esther's 3, 11, and 12. So I'm going to read one last thing and then we're going to get right into the story. And so here is Esther 11 and 12, where it's in the code. It says, Haman and Satan stink. And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also to do with them as it seems good to thee. Then Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people, and every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after the language, in the name of King Ahasuerus was written. It was written and sealed with the king's ring. So I'm just going to stop right there. So I just thought that it was kind of cool how God disguises himself by his name not being mentioned in the text itself, but his name and names and titles are actually hidden in the Bible code of the Hebrew letters of the book of Esther. And how Esther hid her identity as a Jewish person until the right moment happened. So that's kind of what Purim is all about. So now it's the story of Purim.
What's the good guy's name again?
Mordecai. Okay, let me see if I can. I'm going to get the microphone. I might have to get water because I'm going to do different verses. So here we go. Probably be better if I get my spectacles on. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Long ago, in the land far, far away, in the land of Persia, there lived a king, and his name was Ahasuerus. But we'll call him King Arti. Arti had a beautiful queen named Vashti. And one day, the king and queen each had separate parties. One for the guys and one for the gals. At the guys' party, they had a little too much to drink and were getting a bit tipsy. And you know how guys get when they get a little bit tipsy? They start boasting about how hot their girlfriends are. The king was no exception. He too began to brag about how beautiful his queen was and summoned her to come before all the guys wearing nothing but her birthday suit so he could show her off. The queen was mortified and refused. And so the king lost face in front of the guys. Now, this is what Haman said. Your Majesty, why can't you let the queen snub you like that? No, because all the other women in the kingdom will think it would be okay to treat their husbands like Vashti just treated you. And this is what King Arti said. What do you suggest I do? So this is what Haman says. How about you strip her of her crown and kick her to the curb, and then we'll start a search for the next queen, and we can call it the Miss Persia pageant. King Arti replied, Oh, I love it. Let's go for it. So the very next day, Vashti was thrown out on her bum, and King Arti told his faithful right-hand man Haman to send out soldiers to scout out the best and hottest girls in Persia and to bring them to the palace for a spa day with facials and mani-pedis, the works, to make them even more beautiful. In a small corner of the kingdom lived a Jewish family, Hadassah, also known as Esther, and her cousin who was her legal guardian, Mordecai. Now Esther was the most drop-dead gorgeous girl in all of the land. She was so beautiful she made Snow White look like Nanny McPhee. Esther heard about the beauty pageant but didn't want nothing to do with it. And this is what Esther said. I hope the soldiers don't come knocking on our door. Mordecai, he replies, well, Esther, I know beauty pageants are not your thing, but have an open heart about this. Just think, if you become queen, you could do so much more for the Jewish community here in Persia. You know, maybe this is actually God's plan. You're the most beautiful girl in all the land, and maybe God has put you here for just that purpose. Esther said, oh, I could just care less about beauty and power, but if God wants me to be the queen to help other people, who am I to argue? I love God and I love our people, and I would do anything for them. Yeah. Oh, great. I bet that's King Arti's goons at the door. Yep, pack your bags. You're going to the palace. Just don't tell anyone you're Jewish. Why not? Just trust me on this one. Promise me, will you? Sure, whatever you say, cuz. So Esther moved into the palace, And Mordecai followed closely in the shadows to keep an eye on his cousin. One day, as Mordecai was hanging about the palace, he overheard two palace guards plotting to kill King Artie. Mordecai immediately blew the whistle on them and told the captain of the guards. Thus, the assassination plot was foiled, and the palace guards were executed. On his way back from the palace, Mordecai ran into Haman, who was cruising the boulevard on his pimped-up stallion. Everyone who crossed his path bowed before him because he was King Artie's right-hand man. Why won't you bow in my presence, Mordecai? You bow or else. No, I don't think so, homie. I'm a Jew, and I worship the only one and true God of the universe, and I bow to no one but him. We'll see about that. Bow, or you'll be sorry. No, you can't make me. Not gonna do it. You're not the boss of me. Curse you, Mordecai. You'll be sorry. You'll see. So, Haman left in a huff. He left in a huff and began to plot how to get rid of Mordecai and all his people, the Jews. Later, in the palace, one at a time, the women passed before King Artie. So, Your Majesty, what about this one? No! Yikes! Tell that girl to take off her mask. Your Majesty, she's not wearing a mask. Next! What about this one, Your Majesty? No, I don't care for girls with mustaches. We've seen tons of girls today, and none of them can compare to the beauty of my Queen Vashti. Oh, how I wish I never let Queen Vashti go. Is this it? Is this all Persia has to offer? Are these the best girls you can find? Well, Your Majesty, there is one more. Call in Esther. Whoa, Mama! She's the one. She's the most beautiful girl that I've ever seen. What about Vashti? Vashti who? Esther makes Vashti look like a baboon. It's settled. Esther wins. She's the new queen. Make the announcement through the entire kingdom. Great. Oh, will do, Your Majesty. But after, I must have a word with you, Your Majesty, about a very important matter. Okay, come by later and we'll talk. Later, that same evening, Haman, he came by to speak with the king. Your Majesty, we've conquered many nations, and all of them seem all right except for one, the Jews. They're all stuck up and rebellious. They've disrespected your authority and our ways. They're nothing but a bunch of troublemakers. I'd like to round them all up and wipe them out. I'll even pay the expenses of the campaign for myself. What do you say, Your Majesty? Oh, well, sure, whatever you want. Now, scat, I want to spend time with my queen. Oh, Queen Esther, where are you, my buttercup? With permission granted, all that needed to be done was to cast lots to see the best time to carry out this wicked plan against the Persian Jews. The lot fell on the month of Adar, which usually falls in February or March on our calendar. With that settled, Haman... Getting a little slow, guys. Then he went to the local lumberyard to pick up some supplies to build some gallows in which to exact his revenge by hanging Mordecai. Meanwhile, Mordecai got wind of the decree to destroy the Jews of Persia in the month of Adar and told Esther, Esther, you've got to do something. This is the reason God made you queen. You must reveal to the king that you're Jewish. Perhaps he can find a way to save our people. Just because Esther was queen didn't mean she could come to see the king any old time she wanted. The law was that if she wanted to see the king must summon her. And he hadn't summoned her in months. It was months since the king had last asked for her. If she showed up unannounced, the king could kill her. After praying and fasting for 3 days, she decided to take her life into her own hands and show up before the king unannounced. After all, time was of the essence. So shyly, Esther stepped into the throne room before the king, unannounced. King Artie? Esther? Oh, my sweet! I'm so glad to see you! So, you're not going to kill me? Kill you? Why would I want to kill my little schnookums? What can I do for you? I will give you anything, up to half my kingdom. All you have to do is ask. I'm throwing a dinner party, and I wanted you and Haman to come. All right, we'll be there. See you tonight, my schnookum lover bug. Esther was too nervous to ask the king to save her people. She froze. All she could think to do was invite the king and Haman to dinner. So she decided she would drop the bomb then. Later that night, in Esther's dining room, oh, that was a very fine meal. Very fine indeed. A meal fit for, a king. What can I do to thank you for such an awesome meal, my dear? Up to half the kingdom, I will give it. Well, there's a really bad man who wants to kill me and my people, and I don't know what to do. Oh, King Artie, I need your help. Who in the world would want to kill my poopsie whoopsie? It's that guy. Haman wants to wipe out. Haman wants to wipe out me and my people. What? I didn't even know that you were Jewish. If I knew that you were Jewish, I would have never let Haman. And so the king was so ticked off that he had to step out onto the balcony to cool off. As he did, Haman was shaking in his boots, and he threw himself upon Queen Esther while she was reclining on her couch to beg for his life. Just then the king returned. What is the meaning of this? How dare you try to bust a move on my queen right under my nose? But your majesty, enough! Guards, take him away and hang him and his sons on the gallows that he built for Mordecai. Yay! Persian law decreed that once the lot was cast, it could not be changed. So the king couldn't call off the campaign against the Persian Jews, but he could allow the Jews to defend themselves, and that's exactly what he did. When that awful day came, the Jews were so fierce warriors that they ran the bad guys right out of town. Everyone was so happy that they partied down and exchanged gifts. The king needed a new right-hand man, so he appointed Mordecai to take Haman's place. And now the day that the Persian Jews were supposed to be annihilated turned into a day of joy and celebration that the Jewish people have observed ever since. We call it Purim, meaning the Feast of Lots. Just as Esther hid her identity, so we too dress up in costumes to hide our identity. And just as the Persian Jews celebrated the victory over their enemies, we too celebrate as we recall Esther's bravery to stand up against Haman and to save God's people. The end. I told you that this was going to be a different night. I told you it wasn't going to be your typical service. So I really hope you guys had an enjoyable time and really enjoyed learning about the book of Esther and all the different secret Hebraic things that are in the text and just enjoyed that rendition of the book of Esther. In the synagogues, they just party down. They eat. And I wouldn't recommend this. But actually, it's Jewish tradition that the rabbi get drunk on Purim. Yeah. The Talmud, which is a commentary or a compendium of Jewish knowledge, says that the rabbi should get so drunk he couldn't even tell the difference between the names Mordecai and Haman.
That way you brought pain.
So, and what they do is once the rabbi is totally sloshed, the congregation gets him and actually flips him upside down up in the air. So I totally wouldn't recommend this because the Bible does speak against drunkenness, but that's just a little tidbit of information that I just kind of wanted to throw out there at you. So if you haven't read the book of Esther in a while, I suggest that you go home this week and maybe during your quiet time, read the book of Esther and kind of remember tonight and what it was about, because this night is not just about the Jews, it's about you. Because think about it, if the Jews were annihilated in Persia, maybe the Messiah wouldn't have been able to come. You know, it was because Queen Esther helped save the Jewish people that Yeshua was able to be born in Nazareth or Bethlehem, and be raised in Nazareth, and just do all the things he did in Jerusalem and in the temple. So it was kind of a protection and a fulfillment of prophecy. So anyway, that's all I have for you tonight. I know it was short and sweet and to the point. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. So thank you so much for coming.
Big hand, yes. Wonderful.